Hey everybody, welcome to Renewed Mind Bible Studies. We'll jump into it pretty quickly. In case you haven't been able to join us for a session, we'll do about 30 minutes or so of teaching. We've got fill-in-the-blank notes for you as you come in. And then at that point, we will go ahead and cut the live stream. We'll move forward into a group discussion at tables, and then we'll end up having a time of acoustic worship. I like teaching, but I really like the acoustic worship, so I'm looking forward to that with you guys. Tonight's session is going to be the latter half of Ecclesiastes chapter 2. And for session 3, which we're covering tonight, is called Chasing Achievement. And in the last session, the teacher starts exploring what a lot of people think will bring meaning to their life, which is pleasure. He does everything from laughter to experiences to comfort. All the different kinds of enjoyment are all put to the test. And for a moment, those things all seem to offer temporary satisfaction. But then he stepped back, he evaluated it at the end of our lesson, and he found that pleasure could only entertain the senses, but it can't really anchor the soul. And so if pleasure can't provide meaning, he thinks maybe achievement can. Any workaholics that are here today? Yeah, you walked into a trap. But now if you leave, everybody's going to know. So a lot of times we assume that life's answers will actually be found in what we build. We want to build something that lasts. And so the teacher begins yet another experiment. And I'm sure I don't have to work too hard to prove that this impulse that he's talking about is just as present in our world today. People may not all chase pleasure in the same way, but almost everyone has been taught to work hard, set goals, build something meaningful, and leave something behind for another generation. But the assumption is always the same thing. If I can build the right kind of life, then my life will matter. But spoiler, just so you know, in case nobody's told you, your life matters before you ever did anything to contribute to society. There is something good in that desire to work. Work is part of God's design from the very beginning. A lot of times people think, man, I can't wait to get to heaven where I won't have to work anymore. No, work existed before the curse. But it wasn't by the sweat of your brow. It was something that everybody would have enjoyed. And so work is important, but I want to point to something Jesus says many years later in the book of Luke in chapter 12. It's not in your notes, but he says in 12 verses 15 through 21, "Beware, guard against every kind of greed. Life is not measured by how much you own." And then he told them a story. A rich man had a fertile farm that produced fine crops. He said to himself, "What should I do? I don't have room for all my crops." Well, here we'd be like, take it to the soup kitchen, donate it to the poor, share with your neighbors. I don't know, stick it in the freezer. They didn't have freezers though. So he says, I know, I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. Then I'll have enough to store all my wheat and other goods. And I'll sit back and say to myself, he's got an unhealthy self-obsession here. And I'll say to myself, my friend, you have enough stored away for years to come. Now take it easy, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool, you will die this very night. Then who will get everything you worked for? And Jesus says this, he says, a person is a fool to store up earthly wealth, but not have a rich relationship with God. A lot of times there's a poverty mindset when it comes to Christianity, and it's like we all assume that we're the rich young ruler that's supposed to take a vow of poverty or something. No. The Lord will ask you to lay down and walk away from anything that is going to supplant him or replace him in your life. If that's riches, he'll ask you to walk away from it. If it's certain family connections or relationships, he'll ask you to walk away from that. If it's going to get between you and your God, he's going to ask you to take a step back. But that last verse, Jesus says, a person is a fool to store up earthly wealth, but not have a rich relationship with God. And here's the thing, if you have a rich relationship with God, you're going to do what he says with your relationships, with your money, with your time, with your focus, all of that. So everything's a blessing when you have a rich relationship with God. Jesus is just revealing the same problems that the teacher is about to explore with us. A person can have a successful life and accumulate resources and still miss what matters the most. Came from the scripture first, but you remember many years ago, Toby Mac had a song, I don't want to gain the whole world and lose my soul. Let's go ahead and jump into the scriptures. We'll start in verse 12 of chapter 2. So Ecclesiastes 2, we'll do verses 12 through 14. This section is called Wisdom Still Matters. Now, if you remember, in the first chapter of Ecclesiastes, he starts exploring wisdom. We don't want to discredit wisdom. It's just not a good replacement. So these verses say this, I decided to compare wisdom with foolishness and madness, for who can do this better than I, the king? I'm not exactly sure what he means by that. He's talking about his riches, or y'all know how crazy I am. Verse 13, he said, I thought wisdom is better than foolishness, just as light is better than darkness. For the wise can see where they're going, but fools walk in the dark. Yet I saw that the wise and the foolish share the same fate. Okay, after chasing pleasure, building that life that was filled with accomplishment, the teacher slows down, and he shifts the pace here, and he gets very reflective. It's almost as if he's sitting back and looking over everything he's experienced, and now he's asking a different question of himself. If pleasure doesn't satisfy me, and achievement doesn't settle the deeper questions of life, what about wisdom itself? Does living wisely actually give life the meaning that he's searching for, or is it better than living as the foolish do? And so he begins to compare them carefully, and he places wisdom on one side and foolishness, and your blank is madness on the other side. Madness, and he starts weighing them out. If you remember, he has seen both sides. He said in the first chapter that he's lived with wisdom and he's observed what life looks like without it. And at first the answer seems obvious. Wisdom is better. The teacher describes it like light compared to darkness. It's a simple but very effective image. When you're walking in the light, you can see what's in front of you. With wisdom or walking in the light, you can avoid obstacles, make better decisions, and move forward with a clear head. But when you're walking in the dark, everything becomes uncertain. You move more slowly because you're scared of tripping over something. You stumble, and you're never quite sure where your next step will land. I have 2 children. There are always traps when I come out of my room in the morning, and they're almost never on purpose. I always thought it was something dumb that people joked about, stepping on a Lego with a bare foot. It is not to be trifled with. They made me feel bad for the burglars in Home Alone, right? But anyone who's ever had to walk through a dark room knows this feeling that we're talking about. You reach out, you move carefully, you hope you don't trip over something that you can't see. And so walking in the light gives you the ability to get where you're going on time and identify obstacles. But what he's saying is whether you walk through the dark or the light, you end up in the same place. And whether you live as the wise or the foolish, in the end, we all die. And so he uses the Hebrew word here. We've talked about this before. Chokmah, it means wisdom, which also speaks of skill for living. Not just living, but skill for living, knowing how to live well, right? Not just knowing what's right, but living it out. And then he contrasts it with sikluth, which is foolishness. But not just ignorance, it's foolishness that ignores what is right and moves through life without direction. On one hand, it leads clearly. On the other hand, you drift without it. So for a moment here, if you think about it, everything does feel settled. Wisdom is better. Do we agree that wisdom is better than foolishness? Excellent. I don't have to prove that. Wisdom changes how you live. But then abruptly, the teacher shares a thought that changes the whole tone of what he's been saying when he says that the wise and the foolish share the same fate. And that should land heavily. It's meant to. The one who walks in the light, the one who stumbles in the dark eventually arrive at the same place. Wisdom might guide your journey, but it does not change the destination. And we've all felt this when we've seen somebody gone too soon, gone before their time, or something bad happens to somebody we consider a good person, and maybe we're the good person something bad happens to. It just feels like the cosmic scales aren't always balanced. But you can feel that shift in how the teacher is thinking here, because the question is no longer about living well. It becomes deeper. He's saying wisdom helps me live well, but what does that matter? He's saying it can't change where I ultimately end up, so what kind of advantage does it really give? Honestly, a lot of Christians, when they first get saved, struggle with this. They'll accept a salvation prayer, they'll come to know the Lord, but they don't really want him to be the Lord. They don't want him to be the one who calls the shots and tells them what to do, because they know that God is so rich and merciful that they're just counting on the fact that he'll just let them into heaven one day. But the point of becoming a believer is not to get to heaven, it's to get to God. And ultimately, eternity is going to be in heaven, and that's going to be pretty great. But if your goal is just to get to heaven, it's not really about a relationship with him at all. And we have to submit to his lordship. So this is really where Ecclesiastes starts to press into our thinking. A lot of people think if they just make the right decisions or avoid mistakes, that's your blank, avoid mistakes, and live wisely enough, then life will finally feel secure and meaningful. And wisdom does matter. Please choose the way of wisdom because it protects you and guides you. But the teacher is trying to show us that something even as good as wisdom has its limits. It has limits. If you've ever been in a place where you've been really good at a job or a task, and then you make a mistake, and then you're really hard on yourself. And maybe the statistic is that 30 times you've nailed it, A+, 100 grade, and now it's a 92. And now you're mad at yourself. It happens, right? It doesn't take anything away from all the times that you've done things excellent. So avoiding a mistake is not going to bring you satisfaction either. But we're here to renew our minds in this Bible study, and so we're learning to see these limits clearly. We don't live a certain way because it changes our destiny. We live a certain way because our destiny was already changed. So when you love the Lord and he's changed your destiny, then out of this love for him, you live different. It's a grateful heart. It's one that is loyal to him. All right, moving on to the next section there. If you are brand new to it, there's personal insight questions at the end of each section. That's just for you to fill out if you'd like to. Give you some food for thought. We'll go verses 15 through 17 here, and this section is what I'm calling the same ending. So he just says, the foolish and the wise, they have the same outcome, right? Here's what it says starting in verse 15. Both will die. It's encouraging. So I said to myself, since I will end up the same as the fool, what's the value of all my wisdom? This is also meaningless. For the wise and the foolish both die. The wise will not be remembered any longer than the fool. In the days to come, both will be forgotten. And listen to this in verse 17. He says, so I came to hate life because everything done here under the sun is so troubling. Everything is meaningless, like chasing the wind. Well, the teacher doesn't rush past that problem that he just discovered, so he's not going to leave us hanging. He does lean into it. If the wise and the foolish share the same fate, then what is the value of living wisely at all? It's almost like if you pay attention here, you can hear an internal conversation. If I'm going to end up at the same place as the fool, and they get to do all these things they want to do, but I'm trying to be disciplined, why don't I get to do the things that I want to do? That's the kind of way that I would think of it. So he's invested his life into thinking carefully and living intentionally and pursuing true understanding. And now he's asking whether it ultimately changed anything that matters the most. Verse 16 is where it goes a little deeper because it gets a little heavier. Not only do the wise and the foolish both die, he says this, they are both eventually forgotten. Both eventually forgotten. Now, out of history, we can all remember some very famous evil men or women. We can also remember people that we revere as very good men or women. But is it not the same for people that get forgotten? Do you have anybody that growing up was just like somebody who poured into you, and then when they passed away, it's like nobody will ever understand this person the way that I understood them because they lived in the background. They were always there for me, but they weren't somebody getting attention. This happens to both the wise and the foolish. The Hebrew idea behind being forgotten comes from the word shakach, and it means to forget or to lose memory of something, or probably the most sad, to let it fade over time. Even a life that's marked by wisdom does not guarantee lasting remembrance. And so the teacher is trying to confront something that most of us try to avoid thinking about. But time has a way of leveling everything, doesn't it? Achievements fade, names are forgotten, and stories are replaced by new ones. This is where the emotional tone of the whole chapter shifts. The teacher says here, so I came to hate life. Well, if I was a youth pastor, I would say that's a little dramatic. It's strong language, but is it not honest? Are there not times that we despise where we find ourselves in life? We just want relief. And that word hate comes from the Hebrew word saneh. It describes a deep aversion or a growing dissatisfaction with something. Like the longer that you're connected to something, the more and more dissatisfied you are. And the teacher is not rejecting life itself as God created it. He's just expressing his frustration with a life that feels unresolved. That's your blank there, unresolved. It feels temporary. And it feels difficult to make sense when it's viewed only under the sun. So everything that he sees, he calls it troubling. And the Hebrew word there for troubling is the word amal, which means burdensome labor. So not the kind of work we had in the garden. Or it means weariness or exhausting effort. You ever been there where your mind is alert and you're ready to do something, but your body says no? That's what he's talking about. But life begins to feel heavy for him, not just physically, but also emotionally and mentally. That's your blank, emotionally and mentally. The teacher is realizing that even a life that's lived wisely does not escape the weight of living in a broken world. The end of chapter 1 really got me. I hope it spoke to you too. The more that you see, the harder it is. And so, the teacher is obviously feeling the weight of life. The search for meaning is pressing in a pretty real and personal way. A lot of people spend their lives trying to avoid thinking about this reality. So we stay busy and distracted and focused, and we even wrap it up with a bow, and we call it good things like I'm pouring into another generation or I'm trying to leave behind something. But we also need to face the deeper questions. We need to ponder eternity, and we need to think about these things because God placed eternity in our hearts according to Scripture. So the teacher's just trying to lead us into honesty. Because until we're honest about the limits of what life can offer on its own, we're going to continue to put our hope in things that will ultimately not satisfy. And the problem is they do satisfy. If they didn't satisfy at all, we would never pursue them. But since they satisfy for a time and it's easier, we go for it. And once it runs out, what do? We run to the next temporary solution. And it's this constant rat race back and forth. And so the teacher wants us to think a little more honestly. If everything eventually fades, including our names, if both the wise and the foolish share the same ending, where does real meaning come from? A couple personal insight questions for you there. And now we'll cover verses 18 through 21. It's a section that I'm calling Leaving It Behind. A lot of us, we look at that. Well, I may not have achieved the dreams I wanted to, but I'm going to leave behind something good for the next generation. But I'm not saying don't do that. That is obviously wise. Mom, if you're watching on the live stream, I love you. I know I'm your favorite. Leave something behind. But listen to what he says starting in verse 18. I came to hate all my hard work here on earth, for I must leave to others everything I have earned. And who can tell whether my successors will be wise or foolish? Anybody ever thought about that? I'm going to leave this behind for people, but what are they going to do with it? Yet they will control everything I have gained by my skill and hard work under the sun. How meaningless. So I gave up in despair, questioning the value of all my hard work in this world. Some people work wisely with knowledge and skill, then must leave the fruit of their efforts to someone who hasn't worked for it. This too is meaningless. And he actually adds this, a great tragedy. Whew. Imagine being his kid. Hey, you want to read what I wrote, son? He's taking some steps that feel like probably more personal than anything that we've read from him so far. He's no longer thinking about how life ends. He's thinking about what happens to everything he spent his life building afterwards. And it's one thing to realize that life is temporary. Life is temporary. It's another thing to realize that you will eventually hand your life's work to someone else. And we all do. And you can feel it hit him when he says that he came to hate all of his hard work. Well, he was finding a lot of enjoyment in the things he was building just a few verses ago. But that's the voice of somebody who's worked hard and built well, and he's carried the weight of maybe leadership. And now he's looking at it from a different angle because now he's not looking at it from the middle of the work that he's doing. He's looking at it from the end of it. And from that vantage point, everything changes. It's not really in my notes, but where I met Cassie was when I was a store manager for a Starbucks and a Target. And I mean, it's fine. It's a funny story. She doesn't tell it as well as I do. But we'll talk about this later. But I mean, I went to that Starbucks just a couple weeks ago. And while I'm in there, I'm remembering this. I'm remembering standing at the register. I'm remembering her being out there in the cafe part. But of course, it's been remodeled 13 times, 15 times since then. And this kid was probably born the year that I was managing, the Starbucks. And I just looked at it and I thought, man, things really do change. They really do move on. And it's not like I left an inheritance there, but I did leave an impact as the first store manager there. And I had certain policies and certain ways that I managed. Well, guess what? There's a new manager. 2 managers later, they don't remember your management style. They don't even know your name. And honestly, it's okay. Wouldn't it be weird if they were hung up like, oh, where's our first manager we ever had? But we're worried about our legacy. He realizes, the teacher, something that is both simple and unsettling. Everything that he's earned and built and developed will be handed to someone else. And the word that's translated as earned comes from the Hebrew word yagah, and that has the whole idea of laboring to the point of exhaustion. So he's really weary in this section of the chapter. But this was the kind of work that costs you something, whether it is time, energy, attention, or even parts of yourself. You ever heard that saying, I put my blood, sweat, and tears into this? It's almost never literal, but blood, sweat, and tears into something. I gave my life to this. And now it's going to belong to someone else, which is true. And when you go, even a part of yourself will belong to someone else. That's how invested our achievements we are. If you have put some of your own life into something, a piece of you then goes to somebody else when you're gone. You ever thought about it like that? It's a little depressing. So that's when the teacher asks, who can tell whether my successors will be wise or foolish? You can almost hear that question lingering, because what if the person who inherits everything I build doesn't value it? What if they undo in a moment what took me a lifetime to establish? I'll just step to the side for a moment and just tell you, you will not care. Once you step into glory, you're really not going to care. But we have a greater revelation now than the teacher in Ecclesiastes did also. So the teacher's wrestling with something we've all come to feel at some level, the desire for control beyond our own lifetime. Isn't it kind of gross when you think of it like that? We're like, well, I have control issues. I didn't know they extended to beyond my own lifetime. But we want to build something that's going to last, and we want it to be handled well. We want to not just dictate how it's handled now, but when we're gone too. We want it to mean something even after we're gone, but as it often does, Ecclesiastes pulls back that curtain on reality, and at some point, the control ends. He says, so I gave up in despair. I mean, I don't have a word for you there, but that phrase carries the idea of letting go internally, like something inside of him finally loosened its grip. The drive that once pushed him forward now starts to fade. And then he steps back in verse 21. He basically teaches this. Someone can work wisely, with knowledge and skill, doing everything right, only to leave it to someone who did none of the work. And the word translated here as skill is kishron. It's kishron. It talks about competence or the ability to succeed. The ability to succeed through effort and discipline. You ever met somebody you're like, man, no matter what you do, I feel like you learn it. And you're like, good. I mean, it's the ability to succeed. And so the teacher's describing someone who showed up and worked hard and made good decisions. But they still can't control what happens next, which is why he calls it a great tragedy at the end. It's not just frustrating. It's not just confusing. It's heavy. It's meant to be. A lot of people live with the belief that they can just build the right life and leave the right legacy, and then their life will feel secure and complete in the present. But the teacher is helping us see that even our best efforts can't guarantee what happens after we're gone. Just to give you one more bummer burrito before we go on to the next section of scripture, I would just tell you this, even if you have somebody you're going to leave it to and you feel confident that they're going to do well with it, you still don't know. You still don't know. Anyway, all right, verses 22 and 23. This is called the weight of work. The weight of work, and that's W-E-I-G-H-T. He says, so what do people get in this life for all their hard work and anxiety? Now we're talking. Their days of labor are filled with pain and grief, and even at night their minds cannot rest. It's all meaningless. We're just going to sit on these two verses for a minute, because the teacher is giving us a much better view here. Now it's not just the work, but it's the anxiety that comes along with the work. And I think many of us, if not all of us, have felt that before. Even if it's something you love doing, there's anxiety that comes along with doing your work. And so up to this point, he's talked about building and achieving and leaving things behind. And now he's going to describe what life actually feels like from the inside, not the finished product, but now he's talking about it while he's still in the process. Before, he was looking at it from the perspective of once work is done. If that was real, God bless you. But now he's talking about it while still in the process. And so what he describes here is not just the progress that he's made. It's the weight of his work. That question sounds pretty simple on the surface, but it carries everything that we've been walking through so far. What do people get for all their work in this life and all their anxiety? It's the kind of question that doesn't really get asked normally in the middle of success, but it's normally in the quieter moments. So if you're really good in the shop or where you work or whatever, you don't think about it in the same way, but maybe once you get alone and the mind gets quiet, these are the kind of things that maybe wake you up in the middle of the night where you're thinking when the noise fades. So from the outside, a life of hard work can look impressive and it can look productive. It can look successful. That's your blank right there. It can even look meaningful, but from the inside, it can feel different. He's describing days that are filled with labor, but there's something heavy underneath them. And so that word that's translated as labor points to an effort that drains. It drains rather than restores. He's talking about work that takes more out of you than it gives back. Who hasn't been there? He says their days of labor are filled with pain and grief. Well, the Hebrew word for pain here is ka'av, and it's not just pain, it's a pain that lingers, an ache that lingers. So what he's saying is it's not just a moment of difficulty, it's not a paper cut or something. It's when you've worked and you go home and you are sore. Something that settles in and it stays with you. And over time it starts to wear on you. And it doesn't stop when the workday ends. He says there, even at night their minds cannot rest, and that line feels uncomfortably familiar to me. The body might slow down, but the mind keeps moving, replaying conversations, solving problems, carrying responsibility into moments that were meant for rest. And so the Hebrew word here is nuach. Nuach. It means to settle down or to come to a place of stillness. Stillness. The teacher is describing a life where stillness never quite arrives, which is pretty scary when you think about it. I was just talking to a couple of y'all before this session and saying, the problem for me is once I stop moving, I go to sleep. It sounds good, and it makes me feel productive. And it makes me wonder if I'm tending to my body the way I'm supposed to when I am moving. It is helpful on an airplane, though. A lot of people, I want you to hear me on this. A lot of people think that they're tired from what they do, but they're really tired from what they carry. And there's a really big difference there. You might love what you do, but if you're carrying expectations and pressure and the need to succeed and the fear of failing or falling behind, all of it follows us beyond work and into our thoughts. So the world often teaches that this weight is normal, even necessary. The constant pressure is simply the cost of being productive. The rest can wait until everything is finished. But Ecclesiastes would gently challenge us here in that way of thinking and help us see that, I was texting the staff this morning, when work becomes the place that we look for meaning, it doesn't just fill our days, it begins to fill our minds. When our identity gets tied to what we produce, the work never really ends, does it? It follows us into the quiet, into the night, into our relationships, in all the spaces that were meant for peace. Before I go to the last section of scripture here today, I would just really tell you as a pastor, don't let the places that God has designed for peace get filled with anything other than peace. They're designed to refresh you and renew you. You don't work hard so that you can rest. You rest and then work from the place of rest. It's the whole point of the Sabbath. It's a message for another day. The last couple of verses are on the gift of enjoyment. Ecclesiastes 2:24. He says, "So I decided there is nothing better than to enjoy food and drink and to find satisfaction in work." Now we're talking. Then I realized that these pleasures are from the hand of God. For who can eat or enjoy anything apart from him? God gives wisdom, knowledge, and joy to those who please him. But if a sinner becomes wealthy, God takes the wealth away and gives it to those who please him. This too is meaningless, like chasing the wind. Now, just to remind you, that word meaningless, or vanity, the original word is hevel, and it was indicative of like a smoke ring or something that had a form. Maybe your breath on a cold morning, you can see it, and when you try to grab a hold of it, it's fleeting. You can't grab a hold of it. So he's not meaning it has no value. He's saying it's so fleeting, it's so brief. After everything the teacher has explored, pleasure, achievement, wealth, influence, and the weight of work, this moment feels different, doesn't it? It's like the first happy moment we've gotten in 2 chapters. It's not driven by his frustration or exhaustion. It's a realization that is settling in after his long search and multiple experiments. He has chased meaning in everything that he could build and control and experience, and now he begins to see something that he couldn't see before he intentionally looked for it. And he starts by saying there's nothing better than to enjoy, and then fill in the blank there. Well, not literally, I don't have a blank there, but at first glance, it sounds like he's returning to the same idea he already tested earlier, but it's not the same kind of enjoyment. Earlier, enjoyment was something he tried to create or control or chase, something he did on his own. Now, it's something that he recognizes as a gift. Now he recognizes it as a gift, and that changes everything. In other words, if you had a great dinner tonight and you were stressed all day because you wanted to produce it and you felt like the pressure was on you to make a great dinner, you probably didn't enjoy it as much. If you were able to walk in somewhere and there was a hot plate sitting down for you and you knew you were taken care of, you recognized it as a gift, probably felt a little better, right? And so that's the whole concept here. When you recognize that every single blessing that you've got in your life is a gift, it becomes a little bit more than a Christian bumper sticker, doesn't it? Now it's something that you value. The teacher says that there is value in enjoying food and drink and even work itself. These are simple things. They're everyday things. They're the kind of things that a lot of people overlook while they're chasing something bigger. And we lose focus on the good now because we're looking for the great tomorrow. But now he is able to look at them differently. And he realizes that these moments of satisfaction were not produced through his effort. There's something to be received because these pleasures are from the hand of God. So the hand of God is a way of describing God as the source. What the teacher once tried to manufacture through his own effort, that's your blank, through his own effort, now he recognizes it as something that can only be given. Can only be given. What he's saying is the ability to enjoy life is not something that we earn by building the right life. It's something God places into our lives as a gift. And he even asks this question, who can eat or enjoy anything apart from him? Well, the implied answer is simple. It's a blank, but the implied answer is what? Nobody. Who can eat or enjoy anything apart from the Lord? Nobody can. You can have everything and still lack the ability to enjoy it. You can build a full life and still feel empty inside of it. Empty. Enjoyment's not guaranteed by what you have. It is dictated by your relationship with God. And the word for joy here is simcha. Got to pronounce it right. It has the whole idea of gladness that comes from within. You've heard preachers say this before, and I'm one of them, but happiness and joy are not the same thing. Happiness is circumstantial, right? It happens based on the surroundings or the moment, but joy is something that comes from within. It's a contentment. It's not dependent on circumstances alone. So this is the kind of enjoyment that is found somewhere deeper than the things that are happening on the surface of our life. And the teacher is no longer looking for meaning in what he can build or achieve. He's beginning to recognize that meaning and enjoyment come from God himself. Your last blank here is this. Renewing our minds means learning to receive life instead of trying to control it. This is not a one-time switch of your thinking. This is something you're going to have to work on for a little bit. But it means recognizing that your work, your food, your relationships, all of your daily moments, they are all empty. I don't care how much you love them. They're all empty unless you recognize them as a gift from the hand of God. The second that you turn your food, your work, your relationships into something that is meant to be ultimate or provide the meaning of your life, when you try to force them to carry the weight of your meaning, they'll collapse under that pressure and you'll lose even the good that you have. But the teacher's teaching us how to restore it. He's showing us that meaning is not found in chasing more, but in recognizing what's already been given. And he reminds us that life under the sun still carries some problems. We all know this. Wealth can shift, outcomes can change, and control is never fully ours. That thread is going to remain throughout all of Ecclesiastes, but for the first time, we get to see a glimpse of something stabilizing here. Our fulfillment has to be found in what God gives us, not something built, something received. And just so you know, before we cut the live stream, next week when we do meet, and we will meet next week, normally the first Wednesday is a night of worship, but with 2 services on Resurrection Sunday, we're not doing a night of worship there because we don't want our whole worship team to collectively die at the same time. So we love them and we honor them, so we'll continue the series. It will be the entire chapter 3, and that's one of the most familiar parts of Ecclesiastes because this is the one. There's a time to live, a time to die, a time to dance, all of this. And if you're of a certain age, then you remember a song by the Byrds that was heavily inspired by this. I'm not of that age, I just know about it. And this is where we'll go and we'll cut the live stream. We'll do group discussion here. In about 30 minutes, we'll have some worship time together.